All right.
Hey guys, it's Jennie with the Wolek Group, Keller Williams Realty, Tulsa, Oklahoma, looking to bring some value to all of my business owner friends, whether you're in sales or real estate, whatever your business is. I just thought it'd be great to share my super smart previous business coach, Dru Lee. You always make my head hurt because you make me think really hard. So I didn't even really come with many questions because I figured you'd just drop all the bombs on me anyway. So we've got some people that are watching along on Zoom, and thank you guys for joining us. And if you would just like to if you have any questions, use the chat box and I will do my best to monitor that. And now I'm going to allow Dru to take the stage. Why don't you share with everyone who you are, what your background is, how we got to know each other, and we'll let you rock and roll.
Well, I appreciate that. My name is Dru Lee, and I've had the privilege of knowing Jennie for, what feels like a lifetime now, because it's, I've literally grown up in this industry. I was in the military in my early 20s. I joined the Navy when I was 22. I got out when I was 28 and did 2 years in the reserves. And with the intention of going back and getting my master's degree in psychology, I ended up in this thing called real estate. Or we call it, business by fire, because I had this great time in my life. And yay, I came into real estate in 2003. I got to live the high life. And if you've seen the Big Short, there were some elements. I won't confirm which are true or not, but there's some elements. I'm like, I remember those days. And then all of a sudden, 2008 hit, and wake up call. And it's what's happening right now in a lot of ways reminds me of that, except this is different, and this is different because it's affected every business out there, and for that fact, every human being on this planet in some way, shape, or form. So I've been in business since 2003. I became a professional coach I was one of the first Bold coaches in 2009 when I saw that amazing program get written and rewritten and changed and edited, and now we're on Bold 2.0 and then Bold Pivot. And in 2012, I realized that, I really love the one-to-one dimension of working with an individual business owner. So I think you and I met in 11, was it 2010? Whatever year it was, 2010. And then in 11, though, we actually entered into a coaching partnership. And shortly thereafter, in 2012, I did that. I moved into that full time. And we've now estimated, I'm like, coaching years are like dog years, so I'm like 150, somewhere around there. And I think I've done like 13,000 hours of coaching calls. So that's kind of it for me. This has been an ongoing journey, and they say, like, the superpower, Gary Keller calls it, the superpower is making peace with the boredom of mastery. This is always such a changing world in the business world. And to quote Mark Cuban, he says that there's no more competitive game than the game of business, because the one thing you can ultimately control, like sports, is you can control effort. And that's kind of where we are. That's what I love about what I do is we get to control that effort, and we get to control who we partner with, and the territory we get to go take.
Well, Dru, over all these years, you have coached some of the top real estate agents in our industry and in the world, and you have really learned, I've seen your growth through being in business with top other business people. So where did you really discover your deep passion for numbers and money, and that led you to your coaching program that you came up with?
Well, I had an interesting conversation with Gary Keller about a year ago, and he said, one of the odd things was when people ask him what he's reading. He said, I'll occasionally get asked, what are you reading right now? And he said, that's always been kind of an odd question to be asked from someone in his position, because he goes, look, you can go to your mentors 24/7, 365. You can go to a library book, you can go online, you can download to Kindle, you can go to Amazon. So you have access to mentors and who have succeeded before you, and you can do it 24/7. So when you ask me, like, what I'm reading, he said, I'm reading for where my challenges exist. I'm reading for my problems are. So, for the last year, it's been all technology and how do you pivot to technology. And so you ask him at any given time, he's reading based on his challenges. So I ask, are you doing the same? Are you reading to read because you're a growth oriented person, or you're reading with some level of intentionality? Now, there was kind of twofold. On the first part of that, I had recently emailed him of, hey, I just read this really cool book. It was great. And by the way, what are you reading? So, as far as I'm concerned, yep, he's talking to me. I just did that. I just asked him what he's reading. That's cool. And the second part is I realized I've actually always done that. I've done that for as long as I know, is wherever business people were struggling, wherever I was struggling, is where it would be my go-to resource. So there was just kind of a natural thing of, that's really actually refreshing to know. The passion around numbers didn't come because I love numbers. That's actually not my forte. It became a result of necessity. As you know, you've heard necessity is the mother of all invention. Well, wherever there's a necessity, especially in business, you can avoid it, you can stick your head in the sand, or you can become very, very intentional of, okay, how do I change that outcome? Where can I go learn more? What can I go do more of? And just by doing that, I can master that one piece. So I started reading everything related to money. I'd had my own money challenges in my 20s. I say I'm the guy that will testify that the food that they make at a Chevron gas station can sustain and support life. When you're in college and you have a Chevron gas card, and that is the only money or credit that you possess as a teen, early 20s, I can say, yes, you can live on what they produce out of a Chevron gas station. Yeah, hot dogs, Doritos, soda. It's all life sustaining. I don't recommend it, but it can do that. So I've had my own financial challenges of learning, hey, credit is good, credit's good, until it's not so good. And so not only fixing my own issues in that arena, just started studying money. And then I watched business owners have challenges with it. Also, I watched people have challenges with it. Became great entrepreneurs and really phenomenal at sales, and yet didn't have a background in business. Okay. So as a coach, what can I go learn? What can I go do? What can I go learn, such that by doing that, now I've taken care of our partnership in that arrangement. Okay, you can now come to me as a go-to resource, or your coach as a go-to resource. And now you've got your MAPS coach working with you and said, hey, I did all this time and energy and read all these stack of books, so we can fix this piece of the business and put it in the microwave versus the crock pot. So that's kind of how I became in that world of money.
So if I'm a person who knows that this is important, everything you're saying, and I don't even know where to start, what are the books to read or mentors to look to when it comes to this topic?
That's a great question. Gary Keller wrote a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And the first half of that book is all about just the path of money, understanding the principles and the relationship with money, and debunking the myths or the challenges that some people have around the idea, or they get uncomfortable with money. That'd be a great place to start. Dave Ramsey has again, you follow a model, it's successful, you see what works. His book, The Total Money Makeover, because once again, he dispels so many of the myths that are out there. And then there's the last one, just called Become a Bad You Know What, ASS, at Making Money. And those give you a really solid foundation. And then if you want to start even going deeper, Tony Robbins' book, Money, then the library just starts opening up to itself. I'm the demented kind of weird guy that, some people have a midlife crisis and they trade in everything in their life, and they go get like my father went and got a white T-Bird Camaro, and that was his midlife crisis, almost cost him his life, and because my mother was going to kill him. And I didn't do that. I enrolled into Boston University's CFP program, Certified Financial Planner program, which I'm not one, because about halfway through the course, I come across this thing called policy guidelines and liabilities. So I discovered that you can have the education, which is great. And if you get that little stamp and you take that 10-hour test that now you say CFP, that arguably anything that comes out of your mouth, especially in my line of work, could be considered financial advice. So I can say, hey, by the way, Disney's an all-time low right now, and it's been at its lowest point price-wise, and it's kind of on sale, or Southwest is trading at half of its value for the last 4 years, and that's just me making a layman conversation to anybody that's on the line. I get that little stamp of approval on CFP, and now I'm an expert in that field. And for every expert out there, you've kind of got to ask yourself, it's hey, where's my boundaries?
Yeah. So let's switch to the idea of, as entrepreneurs, like most of us that are going to be watching or listening in on this, that's who we are. And you touched on this. You saw that, and you can see this. You can see this with all professions. We may be really good at our thing, and we're not great business people. So what, especially with our current situation, what are the top mistakes that people have made, and now they're suffering through this?
Well, so I'm going to back up a little bit, because that's a phenomenal question, and I think that's really what we were going to talk about today. The idea was around leading with profitability, and yet profit is the reward. Profit is like the whipped cream, the cherry, the icing on the cake, the sprinkles. Is, hey, now I've got a business, and oh wow, it's actually making me money, and this is wonderful. And there's this thing called profit, which was ultimately is the business making money. So you go back and you say, okay, let's talk business for a second. Most people don't realize that businesses can actually last for thousands of years when ran correctly. They date back. There are actually businesses that have been around. Let's see, I think the oldest business that has been around historically is I got a note here, 578 AD, 1442 years old is the oldest business that's still in existence. 5 of the top 20 businesses that are historically old, older than 1,000 years, 800 years old, etc. They're in Japan. You actually get to the 6th oldest business before you get out of Japan. And majority of them are hotels. Yet the oldest is actually a construction company. It's called Kongo Gumi. It's a construction company, and it's been around since 578 AD. Well, how does a business last that long? Well, a couple things. Obviously, location, supply and demand. Anyone, whether you're in real estate or whether you're under another business right now, what I really want you to ask yourself is, what have you learned right now that you wish you had known 60, 90, or since your business inception? What do you wish you had known this whole time? Because if you're incredibly successful right now, I think you've also got to stop and say, okay, what are the keys to running a phenomenal business? What are the keys to running a business that can last thousands of years? One of them, as we always know, is location. Well, we live in kind of a virtually based, physically enhanced world. So your location is endless, right? So we've almost kind of taken that off the table. Several of the oldest businesses on the planet are actually bathhouses. And you talk about location, there are hotels around hot springs. If you've ever been to a Hot Springs, Arkansas, or Pagosa Springs, you see some really old businesses. Why? Because there's only a certain amount of location you're going to have in a hot spring. You can tear the building down, but you're not going to have more. You're not going to have a wider area. So location is a key. But the biggest thing that protects a business more than anything else, more than innovation technology, is actually your database. It's your book of business. And in real estate, we preach this, especially Keller Williams. It's what's your database or your data bank. If you've never heard that term before, perhaps you're not in this industry. You're looking. You might own a salon. You may own something else. You may own a carpet cleaning company. You may own one of those businesses that, for whatever reason, was considered non-essential. Okay, well, what about you? What would have happened had you had your entire book of business in the palm of your hand? What would have happened in the last 6 months or in the last 30, 90 days had you had a book of business in your hand? So the number one thing that protects a business from innovation technology and everything else is actually how many people know you have a business. That's one key. So there, in the book, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, they actually say that there are 4 laws of lead generation. What I've come to know is that's not real estate specific. That's any business specific. The number one thing is build a book of business or build a database. And a database is nothing more than, it's like you break down the word. What is data? It's information. If you study business today, they say that, you know, the information or data is the new oil. And what's funny is most of us are working to recreate something that we used to throw away called the white pages.
True.
The majority of business owners right now would kill their competitor and perhaps, you know, sell their dog for a copy of a modern day white pages. And that's now what we're working to rebuild. What we threw away is now all of a sudden valuable. It's priceless. Imagine if you had that in your greater area and all the information was correct. Names, accurate phone numbers, accurate mailing addresses, email addresses, a way to get in touch with people. So data is essentially information. A base is a location to store it in. So thus database. You build one, you have to have one. I think businesses, the tragedy for so many businesses now that haven't thought this way historically, that have never been in this time, they've never been shut down. They've never been, you know, never, unless the business went out of business, name a time where you couldn't go into Macy's and pick something up. They've even shut down sections of Walmart. I mean, you know, most businesses, the majority of retail is shut down. Hospitality and restaurants, if they're not doing to-go orders, they're shut down. And yet, and salons and self-care and gyms. Well, how many emails, Jenny, have you got from people that you tend to do business with?
I got a lot of emails early on telling me about their plans moving forward. I didn't get one phone call.
Then what? Yeah, I think we all saw that. We saw like COVID-19. And it was like, if I get another, your response or your CEO's response to what's happening right now, I'm gonna kind of lose it. What about the local place that I frequent and that you frequent? My local gym. Okay, not the franchise portion of it, just the local portion, or the restaurants that you go to, or where you go for your self-care, whether it's hair, nails, massage, you know, it doesn't matter what you do for you, what restaurant you tend to frequent, local or franchise. It's where do you live your life, and what are those people doing to reach back out to you? So what scares me, and I think what's sad, is so many businesses didn't think that way going into this. I mean, you like signature cocktails?
I do.
I do. I like signature cocktails. I like things that I have yet to be able to make at home. So if I can cook it at home, I may not go to that restaurant. If I can make it at home, I may not go there. But you know what? There's an element. We all enjoy getting out and not having to do anything. Just wait on me. I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to sit here and be. Had those restaurateurs had a database and they had a way to contact us, what would stop them from doing a Kajabi or a Facebook or a Venmo and say, you know what, majority of our number one cocktail is whatever. On Friday night, we're going to teach you how to make it. Okay. It's a $15 class. You can go to your local liquor store. You can get the contents, the ingredients, and we're going to teach you how to make a cocktail. Now, if you're anything like me, you're not going to want to do that. It's like learning it's one thing, duplicating it is another. About two steps into mixology, and I'm there. You go. Good job. Here's my card moving forward.
Yeah.
See, they weren't doing that, and my hallucination is, I could be wrong, is I think so many businesses, the reason they've been limited is two reasons. One, they've been limited to the way it's always been done, and they're limited to their thinking. Number two is they're limited to their ability to reach back out to their client or their customer base, because they haven't been keeping track of this at a way that says, okay, so I got your email list. Great. I'm gonna put you on our email newsletter. I can't think of businesses that have asked for me for my phone number. What are we doing there? My phone's not ringing off the hook. You said yours didn't ring off the hook. So how many businesses would be thriving right now if they had pivoted quicker and were thinking this way of, what do I do to my customer base? How do I get out in front of that?
So I love this, and it is really important conversation because we know that as real estate agents, at least we have pivoted fast, and we have been told and given the thoughts around now is time for mind share versus market share. So we're making our calls to our people, and they're so grateful to hear from us, and it fills our hearts with joy as well. Um, I have also, we've been sharing and promoting small businesses who
You've
are,
been doing that for a long time. Yeah.
well, what's great is this has allowed me to up that game and do even more. And again, what I'm loving to feature are small businesses who are also like-minded, and they pivoted, and they did the creative online virtual classes or giving back to the community. So you're saying that the value here in having a rock solid business for 1,445 years, 42 years, is to have a database, stay in touch with them, and then all of this creates a strong, successful business.
Yeah, it's build a database. It's add to it every single day or feed it daily. It's keeping in touch with it, ideally in a systematic way, so it's not all over the place. And the bigger the network, the more systematic you've got to become with it. And then it's service. It's service, then sales. So it's service that database and what they need. And one of the best things I think businesses can do today is simply come from that place. And what do you need? What can I offer you? And if they had a way to really reconnect with their customer base, what could they have been doing the last 30, 60, 90 days? I know somebody that said, all right, I will never get hair extensions again because I should have gotten them removed prior to this. And then the window closed, literally closed. And she says, now it's like I'm somewhere between Joe Dirt and Tiger King. And now it's ball cap city. So she said, I'll never wear them again. Well, okay, but where was her stylist or that person who put them in reaching out saying, I'm going to walk you through something, which I know nothing about extensions. I don't know if this is plausible to do at home, but surely there's some kind of alternative. If not, reach out for moral support. Sorry about that. We want to go ahead and get you in. Matter of fact, would you like to pay for it now at a discounted rate?
There you go.
So, all of those things that could have been done, gift cards. I know many businesses have gone that route of gift cards and, with PayPal and Venmo and Cash App and all of those tools, there's nothing to prevent getting a credit. Just imagine if you had given your customer base a credit during this time frame that, hey, if you'll buy over $500 worth of cards, we'll give you a 20% discount. If you'll buy over $1,000 worth of cards, we'll give you a 30% discount. What would that have done to your cash position as a business owner?
Let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on side hustles?
Side hustles, give me an example.
Oh, just another form of making money that could be related to your primary business or could be something separate.
Here's a kind of a cool story is I had the privilege of being coached by an amazing guy named Tony DeCello. And Tony, about 2 years ago, because we never knew when the next recession slash shifting market, when an economic shift was going to occur. So it's kind of like, you hope for the best and you prepare for the worst type thing. So we've been talking about what would cause it and what would create it, what if it happened for the last few years. And Tony asked a question one day, which really it was just like, you stop and you think, and you may go to your favorite mixologist and say, make me one of those while I sit here and ponder this for the next couple hours. And he said, what would happen if, no matter your profession, he used real estate specific, he said, what would happen if sales stopped completely? And at the time we have a market center, not myself, we have another coach who has ownership at a market center in Nicaragua. And they were going through a government turmoil coup, and basically all sales stopped. There was no transfer of real estate from one person to another. It was just, right, the government is now stopped. So that was kind of like the formulation of that question is what would happen if real estate or your business shut down completely? What would you have? Well, you'd have to take an inventory. First off, what do you have? And the database is the value. If you say, hey, data is the new oil, and that customer base is ultimately the most valuable thing that you own, then what could you do with it? What could you do with all those trusted relationships? So if we couldn't sell houses, for example, all home sales stopped for whatever reason. Granted, we never saw this coming, and yet it could have been for any other reason. So that's done. Can't do it. What is a side hustle? Because you still have trusted relationships with those people. So could be a home service agreement. You know, let's think about the things that people don't like to do. They generally don't like to change light bulbs. They don't like to change air filters. They don't like to do maintenance. They like to live in a home and then, you know, yell obscenities when they notice something about it's not working. So what do you do in that case? Well, what if you had a home service agreement that said, you know, look, we have people, I have a staff, we can come out there, we can do quarterly estimates, you'll pay a membership. And now we have a membership that says, if you're part of this home service agreement, you'll never have to worry about a light bulb, an air filter, you know, we'll have your AC and your HVAC system cleaned once a year, etc. So think about what that would be for your business. So what do you need? Once again, you have to have a database, and you have to have a way to communicate with those people of what would that offer be. The key is you ask them. See, if you're in communication with your customer base right now, it's a simple question of what do you need? What can I help with? What can I supply? What do you need from us? And I just don't believe it's dependent upon what industry you're in, because, you know, you don't know what somebody needs until you just simply ask the question, what do you need right now?
I love that.
I got really interested in old businesses. I got really interested in actually in castles. I grew up when I was a kid. I grew up in England, and I marveled by the fact of, you know, the medieval era, the medieval time. And you saw these beautiful castles landscaped, and I kind of become fascinated with the topic. And believe it or not, so I started. I actually started writing a book around it and studying businesses. And one of the books, it's not very well known. It's by Jim Collins, called How the Mighty Fall. And it actually studies in between his book, Good to Great, and Great by Choice. He was actually doing research for Great by Choice. And if you know the story, he came up with all this research that when they took a step back and they looked at it, they realized they actually had a book right there. And his publishers, and they look and say, you know what, this is viable stuff. There's a model here of what not to do. How do businesses ultimately fail? And if you realize, you know, from 1955 to today's modern era, 87% of the Fortune 500 companies are no longer in existence. That's 435 of 500 companies that no longer exist. Why? They didn't pivot. They didn't change. They didn't adapt. They didn't do things differently. They stayed the same, thus were ultimately put out of business. So I said, okay, can a business literally sustain more than one generation? What are some of the oldest businesses out there? Let's start doing the research. Let's start looking up. I think it's kind of interesting, and it's if you watch memes these days, this is like the meme era. Some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen have come out now. And breweries, wineries, pubs have been some of the longest standing businesses in the world. And they've ultimately, the reason you know they pivoted is because if a brewery has been in existence for 500 years or since pre-refrigeration, well, then there was hot beer, and then there became cold beer. Yeah. Well, the latter is better the last time I checked. So they've all pivoted in some way, and yet they've become popular and they've been able to reinvent themselves. So in Jim Collins' book, it says, here are the 5 things of what not to do. This is how a castle crumbles. This is how ultimately it ends up in ruins. And then these are the things to survive, and these are the things to ultimately thrive. So when I looked up the word castle, it's actually from the Latin word called castellum. And all it simply means is to fortify. So if you think about what are all of the things you could fortify and therefore turn into a castle, it's really anything. Anything that can be defended and fortified could ultimately be a castle. We think of a castle as these big walls. Well, what are the walls? The walls are the biggest defense mechanism of a castle in a traditional sense. Well, what does that mean? Well, what are our walls in business? Simply the number of people, when they think of your product, they think of you. If that is into the thousands, the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands, what danger or what risk is your business?
This is
Because there was a time,
yeah.
Go ahead.
This is why Gary Keller says that your database is your business, and it's recession proof and it's shift proof, because it's data that you own and those people know you for helping with that product.
Exactly. And there are times where that product may need to pivot. Let's remember, Kodak invented digital film. They didn't see it. They invented the digital camera, and yet they didn't see it. So you can even be first to market, like MySpace. You can be first to market and still not see it.
Dru, I know that you definitely are a podcast fan, and I love business wars for all of these. Like everything you bring up, I've seen probably a business war on the rise and fall of corporations and businesses, and it all the time had to do with pivoting during times of change.
Or failure to do so when the opportunity existed. I mean, you think about Walmart, where would Walmart be right now had they not pivoted years ago and gone into the grocery store business? Because if Walmart was a traditional business at this point, they would be closed like every other retailer out there.
Yeah.
Unless, depending upon the state. But they pivoted. And they saw an opening, and they started selling groceries, and they started expanding. And because of that, they're an essential business today. They're able to operate. So all of those businesses. So you mentioned business wars. Quick story. I was traveling to Austin, Texas on a business trip, and I got on the plane, Southwest, and I sat down next to a gentleman. And I was not in the mood to necessarily, go full blown dialogue. I also wasn't in the put the earbuds on the hoodie and don't ever talk to me type thing. So I said, hey, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. We struck up and we did what do you do for a living? And he says, well, I'm the chief financial officer for a major lighting company, internationally based. And we do, high rise and, major commercial buildings. And I said, okay, I have no relation. I got nothing. Okay, well, that's cool. How'd you end up in that line of work? And he, the Ford, the family, the occupation, those things. And he said, well, I used to actually was an executive with Blockbuster. Do tell. And all of a sudden, now my interest was totally perked. Yeah, and it went from, and I kind of felt bad for the guy, because it went from, hey, let's casually talk, to he had a spotlight shining in him like we're on True TV. And I'm interrogating him of, then what'd you do? Now what? What do you think of that? I was just waiting for him to say, okay, I did it. I confess, whatever you're accusing me of. So I said, well, so I got to ask, I look at business and I'm a nerd on this topic. I've got to ask, you were an executive Blockbuster. What was happening? When Netflix, and he said, we saw it. We saw him coming. We looked at them. We did research on the company. They didn't even have 1 million users when we looked at them. We saw the technology that they needed to really become mainstream wasn't at the speed at that time. The technology wasn't there. So you had a small network, you had a small user base, and they didn't have the technology to support the business. We weren't worried. In the meantime, the wrong pivot can cost you dearly. So here are some things I didn't know. They were in the process of meeting with Papa John's and actually forming a partnership with Papa John's there would be a location in either every retail space or actually in the store, similar to what they have in gas stations now. So you'd go into Blockbuster and you pick up a Papa John's pizza and you pick up your DVDs and you'd go and you make a weekend of it or a night of it. They also were in the conversations with Radio Shack, another business that didn't exceptionally pivot well. And they were interviewing Radio Shack saying, okay, well, what are the most popular frequent items that are used prior to Amazon? And what if we put a Radio Shack and a Papa John's in every one of our stores nationwide? Well, how'd Radio Shack do?
Yep. Goodbye.
So the wrong pivot and looking at your competitor incorrectly, he said, before we know it, we looked up and if you listen to Business Words, the end of the story said we looked up and
there was some ego.
And they had surpassed us and then some. And then you got everything else, and before you know it, boom, you look and you drove by, and now you don't even recognize them because they've long since changed. But I remember where Blockbusters used to be, as I'm sure many of you do. You drive by and you're like, that used to be a Blockbusters.
Yep.
And they didn't pivot. So I think it's interesting of how businesses changed. Even the richest man in the world has predicted, Jeff Bezos, who owns the world's largest database in Amazon, has said at some point in time, Amazon will probably cease to exist, which is interesting from a CEO perspective. Well, why would someone say that? Because they don't carry the same philosophy moving forward that got us here. Build the walls high, build the defenses, protect the database, and the leadership comes in and doesn't act like it's day one, they act like it's day two, then ultimately Amazon can suffer the same fate. So you've got to have those defenses and be thinking, okay, what does my business castle look like? Do I have a defense? Your only defense is your customer base. It's the one that will protect you from anything and everything. You think about the small businesses. I mean, the hotel in Japan, I want to get it pronounced right. It's called Nishiyama Onsen. Onsen means bathhouse. It's been in business since 705 AD. It's got 53 rooms, and yet they've been in business for over 1,000 years. And even generationally, it's been in business for over 50 years, generation to generation, over 50 generations. And the other interesting part is many of the staff has been generationally worked there. My mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-great-grandfather at one point in time worked in this hotel. Well, it doesn't even have 100 rooms. How does a business like that continue to operate? They have a website, thousands of years old, and yet they've pivoted at some point, and they have a website. And you can look them up, and you can actually book a room at this bathhouse. Looks really cool. I'm looking forward to going there at some point.
When we can travel again. All right. So I want to pivot our topic. So we've talked about fortifying. We're fortifying our businesses. Let's say we did do that, and we are in a good spot right now. What are some hacks or tricks or tips in investing or using our money right now purposefully?
Great question. And I've got asked this a lot. And the reason I say fortify first is because if you look at the landscape, for example, the United Kingdom, the reason it's cluttered with castles, whether they're in ruins or whether they're still operating today, is because what they learned is you could only operate in your territory for so long before you lose your competitive advantage. And all of a sudden now you became susceptible to attack. So they build a castle, they build the walls, they'd fortify it, and then what they would do is they would go take territory. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a position right now where you're financially at that place, taking territory is simply asking yourself the question of, where is the next opportunity for me today? In the financial world, I'd say the question I get most asked is, where do I put my money? Talk to your CPA or your financial advisor, which is exactly why I said, all right, halt, time out. One strategy that's not smart, and I would say to avoid, is putting all of your money in one lump sum into any one thing, unless you really understand it. For example, real estate, you know what, it's never going to go to zero. But if you're saying, hey, I've got an extra $10,000 or $20,000 and I want to explore the stock market, okay? Stock market is so volatile at the moment, and yet if you listen to Ramsey, and I agree with this, so many of these companies are on sale. It's like literally walking in at the bargain barn and saying, hey, 50% off. So what do? Well, they're doing this every single day. So one of the ways Warren Buffett became exceptionally rich is he invested a lot of money in Wells Fargo, a lot of money in American Express. What he did, though, is he didn't do it all at once. He said, what do I think its valued should be? If you're in real estate, then we should become a master of value. $100,000 house, if it's worth 80, or if I can get it for 80, that's a deal. He looked at American Express and he said, it should be worth this. This is what it's traditionally worth. This is all of their numbers because he understands this sector. American Express is worth that. And it's currently priced here. I'm going to buy it. And he bought it and he bought it. And he was criticized saying, hey, well, you know what? Hey, what about that? He said, it's undervalued. Well, what happens if the stock goes lower? It was undervalued then. It's undervalued more now. I'm just going to continue to buy. So if you put all of your money into one thing right now, you're going to miss the window of buy here, buy here, buy here, and buy here, and then ride it all the way up. You'll miss those incremental benchmarks. So Southwest, my example, might be worth 32 today. It might be worth 28 tomorrow. It might be worth 30 the next day. If you do it all at once, you've locked in that price versus daily, weekly, monthly, continue to put it in there while you see in your own, from your own perspective or your own, financial advice, wherever you're seeking that professional. Now you're riding that wave all the way down. And to convert it and say, okay, well, wouldn't you be upset if you bought it at 30? Wouldn't you be upset if it went to 20? No, because you'd be buying it the whole way down. It'd be no different than saying, hey, here's a $100,000 house and you were able to get it for 80. Woohoo! Well, a week later, here's a $100,000 house. You were able to get it for 70. Are you mad at the purchase you made for 80? No. Well, what about a week later? You could get it for 60. Well, arguably now you own 3 houses, one with 20,000 in equity, one with 30,000 in equity, and one with 35,000 in equity. Yay! It's no different. So if you're looking at where do you invest now, the couple things to know is we haven't started the survive piece yet, so you may want to hold on to it. If you've got more than 3 to 6 months reserves, then you can consider what you want to do next. My concern or what worries me is that people are going to get premature and they're not going to have 3 to 6 months reserve. They're not going to have an adequate nest egg, and they're going to say, "Oh, I want to go invest." And what they're not realizing is we're in the survive piece. Yeah. We've got to get through the health cycle on this thing before the economic cycle actually starts. And I think the hallucination is for a lot of us like, hey, click the lights back on, we're back. No, click the lights back on when everyone sticks their head out and realize, okay, it's safe to move around the country. Yeah. And when that happens and the health side is behind us, then the reality is going to set in. Okay, we're going to see, okay, now what's the economic impact?
Well, say that we are through survive and we have a financial plan that we're following. What are ways that you stay accountable to with your calendar and with your money? How do you track and monitor?
You threw me for a loop when you said the calendar. Tell me more about that.
Well, where I wrote calendar for me is like part of like in my 411, part of my productivity planning is every week looking at and seeing where I am when in relation to my numbers and my financial goals. So to me, that's calendaring.
Oh yeah, then it's whoever your partner is, or if you're single, you're looking at yourself. Every Sunday night or once a week, you visit your net worth. You visit your liabilities and your assets. Liabilities are what you owe, assets are what you have. And then you look, is that number going up? The thing to control is control expenses, make sure that your vault is big enough to outlast your competitor. And the struggle is no one would be past the survive piece yet because we don't know how long that's going to last. You don't know what your money will need to ration. And if you've got 3-6 months reserves, or if you're free and clear and you have no debt, then you've got some opportunity, you've got some wiggle room. But the hesitation will be is think about what happens when a lot of your competitors and what happens when opportunities start existing out there that are at huge values, huge opportunities, where $1 today is worth $5 in the future. And you invested that dollar now because you saw an opportunity. So you've got to be a little cautious there. I don't say that to scare anybody. I actually say that to encourage you of if you're sitting in a good place, you just got to understand you're in a better place than the majority of people. 78% of Americans have lived paycheck to paycheck historically. So if you've got cash and you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you're already in the upper 22%. There's good news. Okay.
So I wanted to add in an idea as we're getting close to our time here. Something that we just rolled out was the Golden Handoff. So, I mean, this kind of relates because, well, you know what it is. Do you want to kind of share with people the idea around it?
The Golden Handoff was a book written, the author's name escapes me at the moment. I do want to give him full credit. You can look it up. It was a real estate agent out of Portland, I believe. And so he wrote a book called The Golden Handoff, and it's just the idea of where is their value. Well, the biggest value is in your walls, your defenses, which is your database. So for many, if you're fatigued right now, you got to know it hasn't started yet. This hasn't began yet. That's something that Gary Keller recently told me or shared on a call, is that this hasn't began. So if you're already tired, just know you got to find a way to settle in and get your energy back, get a routine going, because it hasn't started. There are going to be many people that aren't going to want to do this again in any industry. They've built a solid book of business. Maybe they position themselves financially. They have a 401k. They have a retirement. They have savings. They're free and clear. They own their home. They don't rent, and they're just not going to want to do this again. And
this meaning another cycle of
another cycle. Yeah, they're not going to want to work hard enough to go through another economic cycle.
Yeah.
However long or temporary this lasts, they just won't want to do it again. And so their book of business, it's like, well, you worked all this time to build it. Why wouldn't you naturally hand it off to someone else and merge, or do a merger and acquisition? I looked up the oldest companies in the United States, and many of them no longer are the primary company. They've long since merged with other companies. Why? Because they built a business and then moved on. Two of the oldest companies that are still owned essentially by the family and the creators are actually Sigma Insurance. And we gotta love this, Jim Beam. The Beam family still owns that company. Well, why? Because they have a brand and they have a database, and they've continued to own and operate. Yeah. So for those that have built a database and they don't want to do this, they don't have the means, they don't have the resources, or they haven't prepared themselves financially for another cycle, and they're wondering what to do right now, or they don't have business right now. Now is the time to partner, to merge, to look for somebody that has the means to take you the next leg of the race.
Yeah, and I'll just add in. So what it means for us is I created a video, and an email went out to some our in-town agents, and it really is just an opportunity. If now they're just going, man, this sucks, I don't want to ramp up again and have this downtime of not making money and I'm paying dues for nothing, partner with a local agent who is productive and purposeful and focused on database, that they're going to stay in touch with your people and love on your people and pay you a referral fee when those people buy or sell a home. And that's what, so if anybody wants more information on that, I'll share.
But if you're in a non-real estate business, yeah, and you say, you know what, that's all, this is great. You guys have spent the last hour telling me what I should have done and what I should have, and I don't. Now what? And if you're still watching, then hey, this is for you. Partner with somebody who has made that their focus. Partner with a real estate agent who has made building a database as their focus. A BNI group, other businesses, and pull together resources. You see a lot of nationally, it's kind of this growing trend of stay local, keep local businesses local. And you see that nationwide. Well, okay, what's your get local group? Do you have somebody who's heavily focused on a database? And how do you partner and pull your resources together? So a real estate agent like you, I mean, you've got over 3,000 people just in your Journey with Jennie group alone. So if I had missed that window, I'm going to look for somebody who says, okay, how big is your network? I got 3,000 people over here, 5,000 people over here. I've got all of these businesses over here. Perfect. How do I get involved in your network? And while I rebuild in the next phase of my business, while I build my customer base and I have all their contact information, how do we partner together where I can offer your folks something and you offer me something in return? I'll let you put your newsletters in my shop. I'll instead of 500 business cards over here, there's going to be one, because that's how we're all going to get through this together.
Love that.
So there is strength in numbers, especially in business today. There's a lot of strength in that.
What this made me think of earlier too is, I mean, I don't know about you, I go to a dentist that I didn't sign up for that dentist. I'm like, this is the third dentist down the line where they just keep buying the book of business, and I just am used to going to that same place, and I don't care who's telling me my teeth look great. You know, it's like I don't have loyalty to that dentist. I have loyalty to, well, it's convenient and I know where to go and my insurance is already set up.
And when did I get sold?
I was sold. Exactly.
I was sold.
Well,
I didn't even get a residual, yet I know I was sold.
Hey, in our last bit of time here, let's talk about Bold Pivot. And because this is open to all people, not just Keller Williams, not just real estate agents. This is open to all people who want to get serious about their database, their business, etc.
Well, as we said in the beginning, the first thing, like my fascination with building a really big business and that can last thousands of years. And what are those common denominators? What are those models that say you can operate for this indefinitely and it's proven versus how the mighty fall and avoid these pitfalls is one of the life-changing experiences, changed mine, changed so many, is a product called Bold, Business Objective Life by Design. And like anything else, we've pivoted, offering an online product and a way to take this and apply it into your own life, your own business. So if you go to mapscoaching.com, that's MAPS, mapscoaching.com, and you look Bold, you're going to see a section called Bold Pivot. Okay, you can actually sign up for that. It's $99. Usually this is an $800 program. For $99, you get our specialty or our Bold Pivot. And it's a way for you to get your head up, check up from the neck up and get back into business. So as I said, a castle is anything, if you look up the definition, is anything that could be fortified. Well, the number one thing to fortify now more than ever is what's between the left and the right ear. So what do you put in your headspace? Yeah. You and I have a big challenge ahead of us. It's not going to change because we live in Oklahoma. The headspace and the left ear, right ear. We're going to spend the next 20 years attempting to change the perception of Oklahoma that we all don't have mullets and play with tigers and we all know that lady in Florida did it. We've got to build out of that stereotype. So that's digging us in a hole. So what are the rest of you putting in between the left and the right ear? We've seen memes and binge watching television and those things, but it's okay. What are you putting in your head that's good for you? And how are you fortifying that space? Bold is one of those programs that starts there. All right. We go from here to here, here to here. Great. Now what? And for those that say, all right, well, am I in a good place? The only way you really know is that checkup from the neck up. Is what between the left and the right ear is in a good place? Is it fortified? Yes. Am I feeding it good things? Yes. Do I have a solid bit? Yes. What do I have? Great. Now it's time to go take territory. It's time to go charge the hill, and Bold Pivot will be a great way to do so.
I am a fan of Bold. You were my first Bold coach. I've taken it 17 times and now I'm signed up for Bold Pivot and I'm super excited. What's really great for anyone watching is that it's a part of our team. It's a part of our culture. It's just who we are. We are bold. And I think I heard this morning. What was I listening to? I think I was listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You'll be happy for me on that, Drew. And he says, often in the real world, it's not the smart that get ahead, but the bold. I wrote that down for you. So in our last few minutes, you mentioned some Tony Robbins, something that I put on my growth plan, and part of my my 411 is ways that I'm going to learn about money. And so by listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad and some other books on Audible when I'm getting ready, that's how I'm working on mastery. Any other little things that you do in your life that you want to share with others to help with this stuff?
Play a game with it. We take ourselves way too serious in a lot of ways. And, this is just one of those avenues is play a game with your net worth. You can make it homework and an arduous task. And you got to sit there with a calculator and look at bills and look at it. It's a game. Is what I'm about to say, do, or purchase, is it increasing the value, my financial value, my net worth, or is it decreasing it in some way? And when you start playing a game that way, you start playing strategically different. So you're reading the right books, you're doing the right things. And just by the fact that some of the questions you're asking, hey, when should I invest? How would we invest? What would we look at? In 6 months, you're going to really see those things come to light. in a year, you're going to see them even more so of, ooh, I'm glad we held on to some of our cash.
I did set up my acorns finally.
Yay! Acorns would be a great example of something you could do right now. Go to acorns.com and actually start a, sign up for a program, and it rounds up every time you make a purchase, rounds it up to the next highest dollar. And when you get to $5, invest the difference. That's something anybody can do today. And what I love about that program is you can start an IRA or an individual retirement account if you don't have one. It takes less than 5 minutes, and then you've started the ball rolling. So investing is not complicated, and inherently it's not risky when you study what you want to do and you have all the reasons to do so moving forward.
Wow, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. Does anyone that is watching have questions? I don't see any, so we'll just assume that we've filled up their brains and
you'll put the link to Bold Pivot so they can sign up there.
I will totally do that. Now, let me ask you, how can people find you if they want to dig a little deeper or learn a little bit more from you?
Go to the Wynnewood Tiger Park in Oklahoma, and you will not find me there. You can look me up on Facebook, Dru Lee, Drulee, and you'll see me with a picture of Gary Keller. You can friend me on Facebook. You can hey, I'm in one of your groups. I'm in Journey with Jennie too, so I can connect anywhere.
You're the best. I appreciate you. Hey, everyone that joined us today, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you real soon. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.